Good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of these calls is to expose ourselves to different ways that people use walking in their artistic practice. And today's presenters, Adam and Deb, um, have very, very personal stories to share with us, and very unique approaches to using walking in their creative practices. Adam is a storyteller and has walked extensively within the UK to locate the old myths, the song lines perhaps, of the UK's old walking routes. And he'll be sharing his findings and how he is weaving those findings into a written format. Debs is going to present a very personal grief ritual, which took place on the outskirts of New York and involves a pond and walking one-to-one with people and recording the outcomes of her conversations as she's walking, both as an audio format and a written work, and also a musical journey. I have Deb's book, and it's really rather wonderful. So yeah, looking forward to hearing both of these very personal stories. So Adam's going to kick us off.
Thank you, Henry. Yes, and I promised you a copy of my book when it finally gets finished. I didn't quite realise how long these things take. I'm 3 years in. I'm at the editing process now, so it's the hazy peninsula of home is visible in the distance, but I'm still walking the path of the page. Okay, to introduce myself, my name's Adam Skerrett. I'm sometimes also known as Mythwalker. And I guess I describe myself as being a writer, adventurer, scholar of myth and poetry. I started out my career as an actor and theatre maker, and then a few years ago I studied for a master's in myth and ecology with the West Country storyteller Martin Shaw, and it was also on one of these Martin's West Country School of Myth that I met Henry. So that's my connection to Henry and how I sort of ended up here. And mythology not being something that launches into an obvious career path. You sort of have to make the path by walking if you're going to get involved in myth. So that's what I've been doing. I've been coupling my creative kind of background as a performer with my poetry writing and prose writing, and working out just what I wanted to do with this. And I guess the link with walking has been something I've always enjoyed as a child. I don't know what everyone else's relationships are to walking and landscape, but for me, it was my father taking me on holidays to Cornwall as a child and just falling in love with the sea and the landscape. But it wasn't just the sea on its own, it's the sea in relation to the land. It's that liminal space between the two, and I think even as a child, it was the beauty and the magic and the wonder of these places that really resonated with me. And it was that landscape of the far southwest of England, Cornwall and Devon. And the stories as well, there's legends of King Arthur, the fairy tales and the myths that really appealed to me. And I guess a lot of us grow up hearing various different fairy tales and legends and myths, and then perhaps we grow out of them. And it wasn't until I studied for a master's in mythology that I kind of came across this revolutionary idea that perhaps the myths still have something to say to us today as adults in our modern society, that perhaps encoded within the myths and the legends are the ecological information about how to live, in tune with the land. These are the wisdoms that tribal traditions still hold, and they're also held in our stories. And that was a really, really interesting idea to me, this kind of weaving of myth and ecology. So it kind of started out with my dissertation, really. I very much enjoyed the academic side of studying, but for me, I could never just be a sort of a writer in his hut with piles of dusty books. I needed something experiential. I need to be out in the landscape experiencing it myself. And I guess at some point, having the fact that I studied for my MA down in Devon, again in the southwest of England, this part of the landscape that I've been continually drawn to, led me to kind of think, is there some way that I can bring into a practical element of this research, something experiential? Um, and it kind of just emerged, really, this desire to walk in the storied landscape, to go to the places where they say that these myths happened. And a lot of the times, we're dealing with stories here. There's sometimes some history woven in, but we're dealing with, things that aren't necessarily factual, but this is where all the locals, all the stories, all the oral traditions say that these things happened. And I think there's something really interesting about going to these particular places in the landscape, where the stories emanated from, and coupling that in with the academic research and finding out how you experience the storied land when you come to it with an open imagination and a desire to learn. I guess the poetic sensibility is to draw connections between all of these things. That's how I feel poetry really comes into it. It's this desire to draw connections between all these different strands and make a weave of something. And that's what I try and do through my writing. So specifically the project I'm working on at the moment, Mythwalker, so the book, I haven't quite decided on the subtitle yet. So one option is it's Mythwalker, Beating the Bounds of Dumnonia. And the other one is Mythwalker, A Guide to the Stories and Legends of the Southwest Coast Path. And I guess perhaps that latter one is the more commercial one, and it is true to an extent. It is, covering those stories and legends. But this isn't just like, a guidebook or a compendium of those stories and legends. There's something else going on, which is why the first title, The Beating the Bounds of Dumnonia, is still very much alive to me. Now, I don't know if everyone is familiar with these terms, so I'll just unpack them a little bit. Dumnonia is... it sounds like a rather silly word, and every time I say it to my partner, she's convinced I'm making the place up. But it's the Celtic Kingdom of Southwest England. So at its fullest extent, this would have included Cornwall, Devon, and parts of Somerset and Dorset. This name would have been in use in the time when all those wonderful Arthurian myths emerged from this landscape. So we're looking back at the early medieval period, back to the Roman period, and a time when the Celts were in this area of southwest England. And there's not a lot of history, but there's a lot of stories. And we know that though the Romans did go down, to the far west, they didn't sort of conquer it in the same way that other parts of England were conquered. There's a little bit more independence going on down there. And then again, after the Romans left, there's a few centuries before the Anglo-Saxons come down there and, take over the southwest, and it becomes England, and Cornwall's no longer its own country. But you've got a real sense still that this is a place where the stories and the legends and the culture and the folklore and those old customs still endure, both in a practical sense and both in people's imaginations. And I guess, though I'm not Cornish, that's one of the things that's drawn me to that area. And many artists and writers and poets have been drawn down there for different reasons: the beauty of nature, the light, the culture, the sense of it being the end of the world, So I guess it's been that combination for me. It's very much a romantic idea. Although having spent a few years living down there in Cornish roundhouses and mud huts through winters, I can temper that romance with the experience of a cold, dark, muddy, storm-wrecked, Dumnonian winter. So, I've got feet grounded as well as the head in the sky. So yeah, beating the bounds to me is the way I understand it. It's a tradition that exists in a number of cultures, essentially a ritual walk around the perimeter of a territory belonging to a tribe or a parish or a people. And the way I see it as being is a ritualized walk to to get to know the places that were important to your ancestors, perhaps to be told those stories, to physically go there, to bump up against those stones and wells and those places that are of significance to that land and the area of space and sky within it. So my trail, I guess, my local trail, living down there, and I've been in Sussex for the past couple of years, but I'm in the process of making a move back. So my local trail is the Southwest Coast Path, a 630-mile trail, very well walked. Plenty of people have walked it and written about it before. So there's nothing new there. But essentially, the unique element that I was bringing to it was joining the Southwest Coast Path up coast to coast to make a circle. So this was kind of involved me looking at some maps to find out where the boundaries of Dumnonia used to be, and finding out how you could link up that trail, which also involved going along the River Parrett Trail, which is another trail from source, the River Parrett to the sea, and using that to take me in from the coast, and then joining up with another one that took me out onto the Dorset coast. And so I treated this walk very much like a ritual. I guess my idea of myth walking is perhaps akin to other cultures' traditions of medicine walking, or the bardic approach of going out on the land and taking a walk and listening into the spirit of the land, however you interpret that, communing with a place and being open to your senses and what the place might want to say back to you. So this was basically me taking a ritual walk around the perimeter of a land that I've fallen in love with, come to call home, and whose stories I've been studying, as an idea to walk through and into those stories, imagining myself to go back through the soft centuries where, these stories might not just be something that exist only in books, but to imagine them as being alive, as being beings who might delight in hearing their tales told back in the places where they happened. And I went out without a tent. I just took a bivvy bag and I slept wild in the Celtic cliff top, hill forts, on the beaches and the woodlands. So it was very much with that intention to tune into the land. And, even in 21st century Britain, with, all of the loss of, nature and landscape and, all of the issues that come with our modern world and the climates and issues, is there still any wildness left? Do the stories still, hold sway? That was kind of my intention of setting out. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reveal everything that, you'll have to read the book and follow my blogs and see, what I feel, what my findings were. But very much it was, there was a lot of positive things. I felt, that the stories were alive. Perhaps sometimes things are still sleeping, and there's an act about walking a circle and joining it up that is an energetic act. You're connecting a circuit. And as you walk in the footprints of, the ancestors, all these people who've walked these trails before, there's something in myth that's very interesting. I found out. They say that it's like a sympathetic magic. If you walk in the footsteps of people who walked before, you can wound those people if you were to walk, with bad intent. And similarly, if you were to walk in the footsteps with, good intentions, according to mythology, it has an effect. The past and the future are not places that are completely disconnected and unaffected by what happens in today. So there's something that connects us back to those stories. And if we walk with a good intent, to tune into the spirit of the land, connect to the stories and to nature, it has rippling repercussions. That's what myth tells us. And as I say, you don't need to take all of this too seriously. It's with humor, with imagination. And what I've been doing, I guess, as well as writing the book, again, to keep myself sane, so I'm not now locked away in the writer's hut, is launching what I call Mythwalk experiences, which have been guided storytelling walks, part storytelling event, part pilgrimage, and taking people out on round walks, a kind of microcosm of that larger round walk that I did. And inviting them to become mythwalkers themselves, to enter through the portal into myth time and to walk to the places where these stories happened, hear them being told, hear poetry, and have time to kind of sit and be still in these places and feel their own feelings and response. And if I take the walks to places like a holy well, I'll tell them, you know, what the well traditionally is meant to cure, what the traditions would have been done here, and there's a kind of invitation to interact with the place in an appropriate manner. So that's kind of what I've been working on. And as I say, I'm about to move back to Cornwall, so there's going to be a revival of these walks. Hopefully, I'll get to the end of the path of the page before too long and honour my pledge and give Henry his copy and be able to share the book with you all. But in the meantime, if you know, I will put links in the chat to the things like the YouTube page and the Instagram and things like that, where I do blog and share videos from time to time, and I intend to put more extracts of the book out there in the upcoming weeks. But yeah, I think that's kind of a flavour of what my practice is. And I suppose the other thing to say is that there's a term called droll-teller, which is a West Country term for a wandering storyteller. And I guess this is the tradition I'm trying to walk into. And it's a tradition of telling the stories of the places in that you're from. It doesn't have to be the place you're born. It's the place you're called to, the place where you live and move and have your being. And the tradition of the droll tellers is very nice because it's not just a sort of straight, I've got to pass this story down as I've heard it. They would always weave in elements of their own experiences. You know, no, the story's never the same each time it's told. So that's the tradition of the droll tellers. So I'm kind of trying to apprentice to that tradition in my own way through what I call mythwalking.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Adam. Just so I know very, very quickly, how do you spell it? Is it Droll?
Droll, it's Droll, yes, droll tellers. It's one of those things you might not find much on the internet. There are certain things, you know, especially when it comes to Dumnonian mythology, you have to go to the libraries, you have to do it the old analog way. Well, actually, I mean, that's you will find what I've written about it, if nothing else. But yeah, it definitely exists, the droll teller. We need more of them. It's obviously a little, you know.
Wonderful, thank you. That was a really rich insight into your work. And as always, your language is also as rich and fleshed out, and yeah, paints a very vivid picture of your walking escapades and the reasons or the investigations, explorations that are driving it. Yeah, for me, the first thing that came to my mind was this kind of divination, this idea of divination, which is a topic I'm kind of currently looking into as well, and this idea that you're existing outside of the kind of vertical plane of time, moving in a direct line, straight forward, and instead, as you described, you're walking this circle and completing the circle in a way, and breathing new life into this circle. And yeah, I guess my first question would be, what has been your experience of time and space, and have you experienced it shift in relation to the stories that you've been walking and investigating in? And if so, how? Has it been through dreams? Has it been through other kind of perceptions?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I guess if you sort of take this imaginal approach and you're walking out for days, weeks at a time, sleeping wild, you know, definitely these things, you know, reading old fairy tale and myth books and being out in the landscape, you know, at night in some of these quite potent places, I definitely had to say sort of some words of protection. When you read some of the stories, it's sort of, oh, well, I don't necessarily want to have an experiential encounter with all of the beings in mythology. You know, I've read what happens. You know, I'm not looking to sort of be lured away by a mermaid or dispatched by one of the old giants of Albion. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously there's plenty of dreams that come, although actually I found when I'm on the walk itself, because of the experience is so strong, it's almost like a waking dream. There wasn't so much at night. It was, you know, all of the things I was being with. But I mean, obviously, those stories, in one sense, the time travel is because those stories will come from different periods. You'll find yourself walking through a landscape on the Jurassic coast where, you know, the story is very much about, you know, the dinosaurs that were there and then the Victorians finding these creatures. Or in other areas, you're back to the Arthurian period, where it's legendary. There's, you know, there are elements of history. We're into the 12th century. At other times, we're back to elements of mythology and much older, you know, the time of the giants, these stories that perhaps are associated with the formation of the earth, the landscape coming into being. I guess the main interesting thing is the synchronicities. It's when you go to a place and you have, because, you know, I'm going out with having done a certain amount of research about the stories, about the places where I might want to make camp, but not so much that I removed the opportunity for all spontaneity. And there's just so much in the Southwest. I couldn't have known everything before I went out. So there were times when I would go out and have an experience in a landscape. And you know, I'd write it down in my journal. This is really interesting. That was quite a moment. And then you go back and you start studying the myth, and you realize that something actually transpired according to legends in that particular place that is uncannily, you know, sort of similar to an experience that you've had. And you know, it's that's very interesting when it does feel like those stories, those moments are sort of like residues in the landscape, and those are the moments when you feel like, you know, I have tuned in. You know, I put this as my intention to tune into the land, but when you sort of fall asleep at night in a wood and you start to hear an ethereal singing drifting across the land, and you wonder what on earth this is, and then you remember that you set out an intention to tune into the land, and you're in an area where the mermaids were said to reside, then you suddenly realize, should I be so surprised that I'm having this experience? And then you have to work out how to sort of, you know, communicate that without coming across as crazy. You know, it's the humor again. It's the describing, you know, that deep poetic imagination, that kind of bardic sensibility that one gets into. And the challenge of this whole work has always been, and this is something that I think Martin Shaw taught us, is that when you go out and you have these deep experiences on the land, and you have these kind of very alive experiences of story, is that you come back and you create communicable art from it. You don't go mad. You don't die out there. You come back a poet. That's the challenge when you come back from the mountain. Come back a poet. You know, don't go crazy. Don't succumb to it. But you know, find a way of making, you know, and storytelling is a wonderful way. You know, I'm not a historian. Not everything I say, you know, if you then Google it afterwards, you know, is a straight up fact, but it is a story. Somebody once told it, you know, and I'm telling it again in my own way. And that's the tradition that we've grown up with, time immemorial.
Thank you. Open questions. Does anyone have one for Adam? Yes, John.
When you take people on the walks with you, how far do you walk in your circle walks with other people?
I tended to be picking walks that are about 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. I've usually offered a variety. Too far, and it can exhaust people. I mean, I'm also planning on doing a range where it's, you know, I'm aware that some of these places are hard to get to, and you know, I don't want to exclude, you know, people of different walking abilities. Sometimes there's no getting around it. To get to particular places quite hard to get to, and the walk to get there is part of the pilgrimage, part of the experience. So it just depends, really. I'm constantly looking to see, you know, what's a nice route somewhere. But yeah, they tend to be about 2 or 3 miles. Some 5 miles. That's the most I've done so far. I mean, there'd be something lovely about doing a longer walk where people camp overnight, you know, a 2 or 3 day walk. You know, these possibilities are definitely there. The place I'm moving to, Cornwall, the land I'm going to be living on, there's the possibility of doing a round walk there and having a campfire. They're going to have yurts up and an undercover area. So I think there'd be the wonderful thing of, yeah, arriving back at the land and lighting the campfire, and then, you know, encouraging people to tell their own stories and poems, you know, and share them around the fire and have that aspect. So it's not just listening to me all the time. But yeah, I'm definitely always looking at how to, you know, how to offer a variety of experiences that will, you know, allow more people to participate.
How do people find out about your walks? Do you, you know, advertise, or do you target certain people, or?
Well, so obviously I've been trying out different ways. I used Airbnb experiences to list some up there. I did some as Facebook events, and then putting out flyers in places, you know, places where I'm. So it's a mixture of things really, but I will try and signpost everything via, you know, my Facebook and Instagram. And at the moment I've got a sort of link tree site, which is a holding site for a website, which I haven't got yet, but, you know, my mythwalker.co.uk will direct you to the link tree thing, and there, anything I'm doing, I'll post it up, any events there. But the area of Cornwall I'm moving to now is near Padstow, so it's going to be that north coast of Cornwall, down between Newquay and Bude, and Bodmin Moor and those areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, really enjoyed this. I love the concept of a droll teller. I'm kind of resonating and intrigued and want to read more. And a part of when you were talking, I kind of been thinking about labyrinths at the moment, and one of my last walks was a bit of a labyrinth type walk, and I think there's something in that. So I don't know if that's something you could talk about, or walking in labyrinths, I guess.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, when I was studying mythology, you know, we had some experiential parts of our MA as well, and we had modules on, you know, ancient Greece, and we did a labyrinth, and, you know, and it's a very powerful, you know, thing to, you know, sometimes you look at it, if you've never done one before, you look at this labyrinth and you think, well, that's not a proper maze, where are the hedges? You know, I can't get lost in this, it's just winding around. But there's something about these ritual practices, though they may look simple, and once you're inside them, once you actually do this, you know, ritual practice, it's very powerful, especially if it's led well and it has a certain intention. It's in a part of the landscape where that is, you know, a story. There are places in Cornwall with labyrinths that are carved into the rocky valley near Tintagel. Necton's Glen has got a couple of labyrinths there that you just trace with your finger. And there's various different theories about how old they are, whether they're from the Victorian era or whether, you know, they're a couple of thousand years old. And, you know, it's a stretch of the imagination perhaps to suggest that they really do date from that period. But yeah, no, I think that's something I'm going to be looking at more, is how to involve my audience who walk with me as participants. And also, I mentioned at the beginning, my background as an actor and theatre maker, so I've been trying to put together some Arts Council proposals to bring in more of a theatrical element, you know, to populate the walk perhaps with actors and musicians, sympathetic set dressing, and try and find ways where it would be more like a promenade performance, and more experiential. That, you know, how could we get people to interact with bodies of water, or holy sites, or you know, places in nature? Is there something you can climb through or climb over that has a particular significance? I don't want to sort of invent things that have no real place in that particular area, but if there is something that, you know, feels genuine, I think that would be a really nice element to add. So yeah, things like labyrinths, you know, definitely something I'm interested in.
Fabulous. We're going to move on to our next talk now. So Adam, thank you so much for sharing all of those wonderful reflections and insights and thoughts.
And I'll put up a couple of things in the in the comments, there's a link to a short film about my work, and then I'll put a link to the various different places where you can go online to find out any answers to questions that you wanted to know.
Perfect. Maybe you could also just press reply all in the email thread, and then we all have them directly.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Will
Perfect.
do. Okay, thanks, Henry.
Okay, so Deb, welcome, and yeah, we're all very much looking forward to hearing about your work as well. And are you in New York at the moment?
I'm in Boston. Maybe somebody could give me a lesson on time zones. I really messed up the the time today. I hope this is recorded, Adam, because I need to hear what you said. Thank you. Ali, I thought it was 11 and then I was like, oh no, maybe it's different. Daylight savings, blah blah blah. Anyway, so sorry to miss the beginning of this. Hi.
We are also responsible for this mess up. So yeah, we'll be sorting the timings out. So apologies as well.
We need a world clock that's just like, yeah, some website that just says, where are you? What time is it? Anyway, thank you for inviting me, Henry, to talk about the Book of Walks. Should I start?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. Sorry. Give me a second. Coming to you from Boston, Mass, where it is currently about 76 degrees and sunny. I don't know what it's like where you guys are. Maybe put in the chat what your weather is. Let me see where my thing is.
76 is, anyone know what that is in Celsius?
Oh yeah, here we go. Conversions. Okay, just do this. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Please feel free to unmute yourself at any time to talk or cough or anything so that I'm not speaking into a void. I don't know how you, it's an odd experience speaking into the silence of a Zoom. So I'm going to talk. There you go. Thank you. My name is Deb Todd Wheeler, in the Boston area. Talking to you today about a book that I wrote out of from my logbook of walks in the Lost Pond, and it's called the Book of Walks. This is the front and back cover opened. It's from a project I called Radio Silence, which is an album and a walk, and it's a guided geolocated walk. And since the theme of today's presentation is books, walking and writing about it, I want to share with you how we came to figure out how to take an experience with sound and conversation and turn it into a book that would also be an experience with music and conversation in a way. So this is, let's see, here we go. The Lost Pond is in North America, in Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. Its central moment, the Lost Pond, is a kettle hole in a bog. It sits at the foot of a transfer station where the city keeps its salt and gravel and compost. People drop off hazardous material there on Tuesdays and Fridays. The landscape is very wooded, but it sits between some pretty major roads. When you're in there, you get lost. You feel like you're deep in the woods, but you're actually in a sort of dip in the urban landscape of the Boston area. Okay. So thanks for inviting me to do this to come and talk. And it's always an honor to do that. In Boston, we have this sort of 19th century tradition of preserving sort of wilded spaces with the Frederick Law Olmsted's Emerald Necklace. And this is not part of the Emerald Necklace, but it's a couple of miles away. I think that I'll start with this quote by Ernesto Pujol, who wrote a book I highly recommend called Walking Art Practice. And it's sort of a manifesto about walking as an art form. And he writes, "A walker knows that the point of pilgrimage is walking, and that walking means shedding. Pilgrimage is about what happens along the path in terms of releasing unnecessary, visible and invisible baggage, from fat to hurt. Walking is psychic editing. The path is editing you, clawing at you." And I like that term. That's opening up the book. I put it there because the Book of Walks is more editing than writing. There was so much to put in, and it was a question of how to gut it, how to empty it so that the reader could have their own experience and not get too caught up in other people's stories. So the book is, and the project is steeped in loss processing. It began with me returning to this site after the loss of my son Lucas, who was 18 years old, died suddenly for no reason, and just didn't wake up one day. And the woods was a refuge, a way to sort of escape from everything. And so I began walking in the woods. Our friends and community made this shrine that still sits there 7 years later. People continue to leave things at this shrine, and it's made from the flowers from his funeral. So I'm going to read a few pages, and then I'll talk a little bit about structure. The Lost Pond is tucked away in a spongy bog, hidden by dense suburban woods. To find it, you have to wander off the paved road, follow winding paths, and allow yourself to get a little bit lost. The week our son Lucas died, my family stumbled into these woods to clear our heads. And as we walked, we could hear chainsaws roaring. When we came up the ridge, we're faced with a terrible sight, hundreds of trees being downed by a handful of orange-vested workers. And the sound was perfectly sickening, mechanical, with screeching wood fiber screams. We learned later that the land was being remediated with federal funding. And over the following weeks, the site was covered over with layers of charcoal fill and soil, grasses, rocks, baby trees, in an attempt to rewrite the story of this place. And since that day, I've watched it slowly transform in silent collaboration with the weather, the engineers, the rangers, and all of the life forms that have since found this site hospitable for growth. So this is the Lost Pond, and this transfer station here is the clearing I just showed you. So there's runoff from the old dump that was old tires and batteries, and they cleared it. They spent half a year clearing it and replanting it. This gives you a sense of the sort of the business of that place. Department of Public Works and the conservation lands and how they interlock with the roads and the infrastructure of the city. And here's the clearing in 2021. This is a map I use in the book. It has it's a flap. It goes like this. You open it up like so, and it shows you the and then when you turn the page, it's the same map but with different information. So, and I'll show you the information in a second. And as I do, I just want to say that the book was not something I came with up on my own. I worked with designer, a friend, John Kramer, to try to figure out, we took the walk to try to figure out how we could make a form that would not try to explain the walk that I offer, the guided geolocated walk, it wouldn't try to explain it, but it would try to offer something else. In the actual guided walk, we begin here. I meet people by the side of the road. They contact me either through my website or through Instagram or word of mouth. And they download an app, Echoes XYZ geolocation, and get earbuds, and we meet and we walk down the road up this little path. This is the clearing. We walk up to Lucas's shrine. We walk through the bog. We sit at the dock of the Lost Pond. We walk behind the transfer station and then back down the road. And the idea is that we return different from how we set out. And that is by a variety of things. This is the second flap, and it's the songs. And when we walk down the road, we hear a song called Gone. And the lyrics of the song called Gone, I wrote before Lucas died. I wrote all these songs before he died, but it was, the lyrics are, if what you love is gone, if what you know is gone, if what you fear is gone. And it is a sort of a song that tackles the idea of the things that hold you back. Like, if your belief system is gone and you could rewrite your story, what would you do? But when everyone died, Lucas died, Rob died, Andrew got cancer, suddenly the song meaning was so crazy different. And that's how I think I ended up making these recordings and putting them in the woods, was in that sort of astonished mode of how music can have many meanings. So each one of these, there's a space between songs where we talk, things happen. The song up here is called Bear Hunt. It was inspired by anthropologist Tim Ingold's writing of an essay about the children's book, The Bear Hunt. We can't go over, we go over, under, we can't go over, under, we got to go through it. And that's sort of the theme of loss processing. You just have to go through it. So when you're reading the book, there's echoes of these lyrics of all the songs in a different font. So there we go. So the whole thing ends up being a big collaboration. As we walk, we're mindful of the weather. If it's a scorching day or a freezing day, I think we went once when it was 9 degrees outside, very cold outside. The ground is frozen. Other times it's very hot. If it's raining, it doesn't really work out. But so that's the first collaboration. The second collaboration was in the making and recording of the music, the writing and recording of the music with Terrance Reeves and the LENNYcollective. The photography in the book is my own, as well as that of Kelly Davidson, a rock photographer, and Elijah Mickelson, who used a drone for some of it. And then the collaboration with all the walkers. There are a couple hundred walkers who've come with me through these woods. Why would somebody choose to do this? It's a grief ritual. It is a way to step outside of the routine and allow for a conversation with a total stranger about anything that comes up. So those are the walkers. And then the book, edited by Tessa Day and created with John Kramer. All these layers of collaboration for me were ends up being not something that I could predict, but when we started out, but just ended up asking people, would you help me with this? Are you interested in doing such a thing? And so one of the beautiful sort of remedies for deep grief is community. And so this project offered that. And as a this is the logbook that the writing comes from. The logbook is full of information that is none of anyone's business. So the Book of Walks itself is and edit to figure out what is the business of the reader, what is interesting for the reader, and what's private and what actually becomes part of a longer story. Okay. This is a drone picture above the Lost Pond dock. And this is the entry of the book. So I know, Henry, you've read the Book of Walks, and you haven't done the walk. So I'm curious how it operated for you as an experience in the read. And so we tried to have the design of the book pull the reader into the lost pond, into the idea of getting lost, into the idea of the questions. So back to the site. The way the book works is it operates not through chronology, but by geography. So in the read, the reader will begin in 2019 here, and the next entry is here, and it's 2021 or something like that. And it jumps in time and in weather, but it advances the reader through the paths. And I'll give you an example of that that decision to be geographical, which allows the reader to be in the site. And there's a couple other decisions that we hope did that. This is the first walk and the beginning of the book, walk number 1, Jane, May 30th, 2019, 9 a.m., sunny and 70 degrees. I'm conducting an experiment. It's an exercise in site partnership with Lost Pond. Here's a lyric. What you know is gone. I find myself repeatedly drawn here in an endless haze of grief to walk these paths, to tend a shrine built by many loving hands in honor of my son Lucas, and lie back and stare at the sky to fall apart. In the silent spaces, I swear I hear Lost Pond calling to me in wordless flirtation, an invitation to come, to linger, to listen. Today, my friend Jane has agreed to test the placement of songs in a geolocated audio walk along the trails, and to test the gentle choreography of this walk with me. I know she'll help me understand what it is that I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to create or heal by inviting people to walk and listen with me. I think of myself as a guide, but also a participant. I learned from grief activist Terrance Wheeler that someone, or maybe something, or some place needs to be a container, one who holds space so that another can fall apart. We prepare our phones to geolocate, and we start. As we pass through the yellow gates, the first sounds of the song Gone mingle in our ears with the soundscape of the place. We hear an airplane, those swallows over there, a soft wind, and a steady drum beat.
Wow.
I heard a sound. Thank you, Tamsin. Where am I? I'm just going to read the second one, and then I want to talk about the picture that goes here. Walk number 63, Tori, February 7th, 2020, 10 a.m. Pouring rain, 38 degrees. That's cold. That's just above freezing. What's a little rain, she asks. If it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me, I reply. If we're wearing the right clothes, it might actually feel soothing. Possibly, but not today. Today's rain is so cold, and it dumps down hard. We're at the entrance to Skyline Park, a former Superfund cleanup site, and home to Lost Pond. There used to be a dump here, with toxic ash from the incinerator leaching into the surrounding woods and ecosystem. Since the dump's closure and cleanup, this place has been transformed into a multi-use green space with a winding access road down the middle, leading to a municipal transfer station. On the right side of the road, the grass is groomed, there's a soccer field, and beyond that, a parkway. On the other side, it's wild, deep woods, dirt paths, a set of stone stairs that lead to Lost Pond. We step out of our cars and within seconds are drenched by this cold, heavy rain. Neither of our phones manages to launch the geolocation app for the walk. Ugh. We turn back with a promise to reschedule, which we did. In the left side, you can see that there are 6 words, and each of the entries that I made in the logbook is accompanied by a little list of 6 words that I've just distilled the entry. And John Kramer, I wanted to keep them at a list in the bottom, and John's idea was to put the words in the image. And I think what happens, what has been reported to happen for some people, is that when they search for the words, they sort of enter deeper into the picture, because sometimes the words can be really buried: soothe, incinerate, soggy, failure, abort, disappoint, lost, found, pup, hero, coin, appear. That's from another entry that I'm not reading. Falling, flirtation, courtship, partnership, container, conducting. Linda Veens, who's a friend of the photographer Kelly Davidson and a rock and roller, agreed to come to be shot for these pictures. It's such a private, there are very few pictures because it's a private experience. And there's something about photography that is a little, I don't know, rude and disruptive. So those are Linda walking with me and allowing that sort of view into something private. Walk number 19, Jessica, July 5th, 2019, 9 a.m. Cloudy, 88 degrees. That's sort of warm and lovely. This clearing, this place is as old as Lucas is gone, I say. Clover and tall grasses, young trees and rocks the size of living room furniture have been landscaped to look like they've always been here, but they haven't. They arrived right after Lucas died. So I know their growth only in relation to my own grief. In my mind, their existence and my grief are linked. I was listening on the radio the other day and I heard Brian Eno being interviewed. He's talking about tending to our own growth. And he asked, this is a question about growth. What is it we actually want to be growing? Right. There's an urgent warning in that question. It's important to notice what is growing and see if it's supporting what we want to be growing. The clearing in spring. Not every picture has 6 words embedded. And John Kramer kept this perforated line that's in the original logbook, and it travels through the Book of Walks. This is the 3rd section. I'm not going to read that one. There's Lucas. The shrine in winter. All year round, there's little gifts that strangers and friends leave in the shrine. I made this little walking stick, sort of engraved it to say, the boy who lived, loved, loves, a little Harry Potter reference to his exuberance. And he was completely captivated by book 7. Walk number 69, Leo, February 16th, 2020. She wonders about space, as in distance, in time, in proximity, and her questions are urgent. How much space does a suffering person need? What is a loving distance? What is a neglectful distance? How to tell the difference? There's that word space again. Space created by time, marked by dust, layers of dust, and days and tears and routines turn in and on themselves. And here's a lyric. Sometimes obstacles loom and get in the way, and it seems easier to just turn away. I wrote the song Bear Hunt about the enormous gap that exists between feeling and communicating. How language can fail in its job to communicate matters of the heart. Now, across the chasm of time, a very painful time, this song speaks to me of something entirely new. It's not only language that fails, but also the mind, the body, the psyche, the community, society, love, democracy, all of it. I don't know, I say. It doesn't hurt to step into that space and see if you're welcome. And although I spend my days listening and telling stories, I tell her, just don't give advice, complain, or tell stories. Nobody wants to hear stories of other people's misfortunes. Nobody. And I don't know why I say it, but that's what I say. I'm so grateful to have taken these pictures with Elijah Mickelson of the bog, the mossy, beautiful bog, because this year, when people ask me to go on an audio walk, I don't want to go as much as I used to because the city graveled over the bog paths. And so now it's great if you like an easy walk, but it used to be a hard walk of sticky, gooey bog, which I loved. And now the song, you walked amongst the roots and the moss, but now this is all graveled over. Barf. Walk number 71, Julius. We're in the bog, February 19th, 2020. Are we over time? Did I go too long? Ken?
We
can
have
end.
we have reached the top of the hour, so sometimes we've like stretched it over to sort of 10 past.
Okay. I can finish up.
Um,
You want me to do that? No more reading.
that would be, yeah, no, that would be lovely. And then maybe we can take a couple of questions if anyone
Okay.
has any.
I will just scooch through. Look at this great picture. Dog feet, people feet. So these are some more images. Oops, I love that one. I'm uncomfortable, she said, because I'm allergic to bee stings. And this is an alarming statement, given that we're sitting in the middle of what might be called a bee party as we listen to the song Cloak, Lost Pond, on the dock in July, teeming with bees. I have an EpiPen, she says. Not running, not screaming, cool as a cucumber. Those are the words on the left. Anyway, yeah. Ask me any question that you like in this moment. This is back down the road. Da da da. Ba ba ba. There's an essay by Jill Slosberg Ackerman, who went for the walk 2 times and wrote about it. And I'll just leave it on this slide. So those are references that we used to make the piece. So questions, observations, or anything, and I can put a link to how to get the book. If you're not in the US, it's harder to get you the book, but I will get it to you. Oh, there's John Kramer. Wave your hand. There's John. Hey, John.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, it feels like, well, feels like now that words are not really appropriate, or they don't really come to me. It's yeah, I found both the reading and listening experience really moving, and yeah, listening to you talk as well. Definitely tap into the universal field of grief that, yeah, is with us at all times. And I think that's the triumph of this work, is how you manage to convey a very personal story and invite other people into experiences of ecological grief and personal grief and universal, universal themes around grief. So yeah, thank you, Deb. It was really beautiful, and the visuals as well, as always, have just been super razor sharp. The
You.
music, everyone, is beautiful. So I'd really recommend getting a copy of the book. I don't know if your music's available elsewhere, but yeah, if anyone's got a burning question, please now raise your hand or just jump in and ask it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It's really seemed like a very, very special project, and such an enormous amount of thought and care gone into the book. It's amazing. I was going to ask about the experience of wearing earbuds, so that you said enough that you could hear the music and the weather, and you speak and converse with each other as well. Is that, do people take them out and put them in and take them out, or you're able to do but all of that at the same time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's everyone's different. It's important not to bring noise canceling earphones. What somebody did once, and I just had them use mine because there is some. I recorded a lot of the field recordings using binaural microphones, which when you're recording, you have the microphones in your ear. And then in the soundtrack of the song, it really sounds like those things are here. So you'll hear people talking or birds song that's not of that season, and it's because it's layered in as if it's real. And so there's a beautiful mixture of confusion, which is important to me, of the present and the past. And I embedded also sounds of my son laughing and my brother talking to me. And so I think why I like to do the walk is I visit them in the woods through those sounds. And so the conversation happens between songs. One of the only rules is no talking during a song. And we talk between the songs, and some people just leave the earbuds in and some people just pull one out. I haven't encountered many people feeling flustered by that, but because it feels more natural. Like, ready, go. We stop, we talk, ready, set, go. Put it back in, check your geolocation. Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
say something, Deb?
Yeah.
Having done the experience, I've done a lot of things there where there's some art and environment combination going on, and the environment always wins to me. It's like always much more interesting than any art that you could impose on a given space. And so I was skeptical when I did a trial run of the walk, actually. And the music is open enough, there's enough space in it so that you can really hear, twigs crunching under your feet and be super aware of what's going on without feeling like the art is blocking your experience of the place. It's a really successful, I think, combination of those things.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
John. Yeah. I wonder
Yeah.
if I know it's some people joining at 12 because I sent a reminder for people at 12. I wonder if we could leave the Zoom room open Allie, could we leave the Zoom room open for an hour so we could have some time, or no, you have to go?
I can't, but I can make somebody else host, can't I?
Oh, make me host.
I guess I could. Let me try this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Does
Great.
that work?
Awesome.
Hopefully that
Okay.
means it's going to keep recording on your Zoom as well.
Okay.
Well, should I wrap it up for the people that have to leave, and with
Yeah.
Henry as well?
Yeah.
So thank you both, Adam and Deb. That was a really, really powerful and I think, the two kind of really worked well together, which was Henry's vision for the session. And really, really made me think about obviously how the walking can make you really emotionally connect deeply with the environment, and that's something that we're particularly interested in. So I just want to remind people that the next session is on the 21st of June, which is in fact midsummer. I wondered if we could have a collective conversation. In the last meeting, I mentioned that we'll be running a project called Beach of Dreams, and it's about engaging people with the environment and thinking about the future and the climate emergency. And we really want to look at how what the artist's role is in creating emotional connections, and then whether there's that, by doing that, it has an impact on communities to think or behave differently. So maybe if people agree, I could send out some questions that we're thinking about, and it would be really fantastic if we can have it more of a kind of conversation, because we've done, I think, 80 of these seminars, and it would be an opportunity for us to think about what we've talked about and see where that leads us in terms of the power of artists and the role of walking. And that's with in mind that then when we get to the World Trail Network Conference, which some people will be at, many people can't, how we reflect our experience back to that wider audience and to the trail makers, many of whom are not necessarily artists. So it's about the arts culture team, which this is part of, sort of feeding back on our learning and then thinking about what next we do in the next couple of years in this group. So it'll be a bridging session. So I'll send some questions and hopefully see you then. And sorry we got the timing mucked up. That's something we're all going to learn. So I'm going to leave you, and everyone who wants to stay can stay with Deb, and we can circulate the recording later. Okay, thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Thanks, Ali. And yeah, just to add a couple of things of housekeeping just around this group in general. It's part of the World Trails Network. I'm sure some of you are not aware what that is, but it's an organization featuring different trail projects from around the world. And Ali and I are part of the Arts and Culture Task Team, and we've been offering a series of seminars exploring the role art can play in walking can play in different art forms and different art projects. And Adam and Deb's talk, if you missed Adam's, it will be available, it will be recorded and posted on the website. So if you're interested in staying part of this group, you can contact me. I will put my email in the chat now, and we'll just add you to the list. Great.
Thank you, Henry.
Sure. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Adam. If anyone's got to go, you've got to go. I have to go quite soon, but yeah, I'll stay on for as long as I can.
No, well, I just wanted to, I just see that my friends here in the US, my mom, wave mom, and some
Hello.
friend Ed in California. Hey, Carolyn, Wenhow, my Beth. So I feel responsible for the time. Hi, good morning. So I just wanted to open it up if you just wanted to have a conversation, but what I did talk about, we missed Adam's beautiful, Adam, can you do your whole talk again?
I'm happy to say something. I'm just
Please do.
the whole hour, but
Please say something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess first of all, just to say in response to, obviously, you've got people joining who haven't heard your talk either, so you need to do the same. But I just have had the pleasure of hearing that, and and not, apart from the bits of information that have been posted on the sort of the trails for this talk, I wasn't aware of your practice and your project and your story. So thank you very much for what you shared. Some things you haven't seen what I presented, but there's certain things that resonate, and I think it's that way where something is curated well, where you put people together, and there's interesting, the stories speak to each other in certain ways. So I think it was this aspect of how you have to go through the stories, walking through the stories, and that experience. I mean, I'm at the editing stage now of my book, so I'm dealing with a lot of material, far more than I can publish. Some of it is personal, or some of it is not deeply personal in terms of something I couldn't share with people, but it's just these are the experiences. It's like my photo album, my logbook of this adventure I went on my walk. And, you know, these things mean something to me. And the fact that I've written and articulated something about it, you know, is important to me. And it's when working out how to tell that story to others, how to guide them through the experience of the walk, of the path, of the page, you know, that they don't spend ages at every rock and every well and everything I saw, you know. And it's a skill in itself. That kind of almost disassociating yourself from your personal connection to the story, so that you can kind of say, okay, now I've done this for me. Now, what do I need to do for the reader, for the participant? How, you know, how best can I share that with them? And it's interesting because, you know, I use that phrase about walking through the stories, and for my work has been through the ancient myths and legends. But one thing I experienced through studying doing my MA in mythology was realizing how powerful these stories are to our, you know, to the modern times, to our personal lives as adults. You know, something we're told that these are fairy stories, these are bedtime stories for children, but how when you work deeply with a story, as you work deeply with the landscape, you know, it speaks to you, and you find yourself in places in, you know, in an ancient story, resonating with characters and situations and experiences. And there's, you know, there's ecological information encoded in these ancient stories that suddenly feels very alive and very pertinent to your own personal situation, or to our situation as, you know, as people in this time with all the environmental issues that are going on. And you know, it's something that is just about still clinging on in those parts of the world where we have tribal ways of life with some authenticity, and but it's also, you know, in the stories as well. And I think that trying to bring kind of my practice is working through poetry, so trying to kind of, I said this in my talk, I feel like part of the art of poetry is making connections, is weaving together all these things. You find your personal experience, the landscape, the ecological story, the ancient stories, and how to draw connections between all of these different aspects. What are they all saying to each other, and how do you then make a communicable art form from that then can, you know, tells a story and shares something with others. And I mean, again, I resonate with the fact that, you know, you're working on different levels, creating a book, an album, and also a walk, you know, taking people to these places, which is something I've been trying to do as well, partly just to keep myself sane from not just sitting in a, you know, writer's studio with my books and my laptop and my research, that I've been, and not just as a procrastination and not finishing the book, but to go out and take people on little microcosms of the larger walk that I did, and to share the stories and the places where they happen, and take people on guided walks. So for me, my journey was doing the Southwest Coast Path in Southwest England. So this is the kind of Celtic tip of Britain. It's where all the Arthurian stories come from. It's a country rich in myth. It still has wild places. Very, very beautiful. It's a well-walked trail, the Southwest Coast Path, but what I kind of tried to do that was different was to join it up to make a circle, because as well as being this trail, it also almost describes the boundaries of an ancient Celtic kingdom known as Dumnonia. And when I discovered that there was a ritual practice called beating the bounds, which is to take a circular walk around an area that means something to a parish or a tribe or a community, it was this whole idea of doing a ritual walk, connecting a circle, as I can see that you're doing, Deb, with your walks. You know, that circular walk, the idea of not being the same as when you started, when you come back, that, you know, you've walked on a circular walk, you've connected a circle, something energetic about that. And tapping into that kind of ancient custom of, you know, why did people beat the bounds? Why did they walk around the area of their land? It's partly so that they can become intimate with it, connected to it. They know the stories of the land, both the local stories of this is where that happened to your father's father, or this is the place we always go, the meaning that's attached to these places. And again, it's trying to make the weave and finding, well, what does it mean to me at this phase of life to go there, to sleep out wild in these places and have an experience. So I went out and did 8 weeks walking without a tent, just in a bivvy bag, in the rain and the frost and the sun. And it was just, you know, it's that experience, that adventure, the idea of going out on an old-fashioned romantic quest. And it's like to really go to these places and sleep wild in them and feel what I feel there, and then take that information and combine it with what the stories and the old storytellers say, and try and find, you know, some way of articulating that, inspiring people to take them there in their imagination, obviously, when they read the book. And then if they come and join me on a guided walk, to take them on a smaller, you know, curated version of that. Although I have got plans for, you know, how can I get people out there sleeping wild under the stars, you know, on a 2 or 3 day walk. So it's a mix of a part pilgrimage, part storytelling walk, and trying to weave together the stories of my experience in this place with the stories themselves, going to the places where they say they happened, because there's something powerful about going to a place where a story is from, where there are perhaps landscape features that you can interact with, those bodies of water or whatever it happens to be, and tuning into the ancient folklore practice that might have been conducted in this area, you know, how do people relate to the holy wells or the ancient standing stones or whatever it happens to be. I mean, obviously, in a sense, I'm blessed. This is a very, you know, beautiful part of nature. But at the same time, it bears all the scars from the mining, from the industry that took place in Cornwall, you know, and it's also a place that is, despite the beauty, is one of the poorest places in Europe. You know, it's there's a lot of people struggling there. So it's working out how to involve the people who live and move and breathe and have their being there, and their stories. You know, something that is as much for the holiday maker or the tourist or the pilgrim who's drawn to visit this area, to the people who live there, and how can I bring those people together. And so yeah, so that's just a little kind of recap of what my talk was, and you know, how I kind of, you know, yeah, it's very energizing, very beautiful hearing your articulation, Deb, and you know, your friends and family and people you brought along who are now going to get to hear it again or hear another version of it, or in for a treat.
Right. Well, Adam, how do you feel like you were changed after that 8 weeks? I mean, coming back, returning to the start.
I mean, I guess some things take time to percolate, and still are. To the point where I've been physically separated from that landscape for the last 2 years and felt quite difficult about it. And it's next week I'm going back to live there again. And that
I'm the only one who can't hear Adam, or is Adam on mute?
Wait,
what was that?
I think he was not muted. Yeah. I don't think that was a question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's been an element of like, well, why was I beating the bounds of this place? Because I wasn't born there, but it's something that the storyteller Martin Shaw, who I train with, says, you know, it's more important to be of a place than from it. So it's this kind of, we can talk about, you talk a lot about growth. There's also this sense of depth, you know, you deepen in, or you grow into a place, you know, a place that claims you feel called to, that, you know, you develop your own personal mythology with. So for me, it was a sense of like, this is a place that I called my home, that came to be my home. And that's why I was walking around. It was because, you know, this was my home and I needed to know it. Until I'd, you know, walked every mile, I kind of felt it hadn't, you know, I hadn't earned the right to be of that place yet. It was part of that connection. And then there's this strange going away for some circumstances that had me living up country. I'm currently, in my last few days, I'm in a city, you know, 24-hour traffic noise outside my window. And it's like driven me slightly crazy. And it's like, what's happened? I've written this book about this place. Why have I been separated from it? But I think it's been part of the journey. And it's like walking back now on the path of the page. So I don't know. These stories never quite end. They're alive, and yeah. So I haven't got to the conclusion of how it's changed me yet. It's still changing me. But you know, my sort of pledge to the land and to the stories is to sort of honor them and tell their stories and take people there and share them. So it's sort of that's now is sort of, you know, the work that I want to get out there, to share the book, the writing, the experiences, all of the different things, different elements of the artistic practice that come with it is kind of my attempt to try and give back, while also recognizing there's part of me that wants to earn a livelihood from it as well. Those things are always connected.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Now I want to go.
Yeah.
You know, Pam Posey's here. We signed on to do, you know, live outside in tents in Iceland with Henry.
Yeah.
Which was treacherous, right, Pam?
It was, and I was wondering how that whole trip has influenced you in this project, or if it has.
Very much, actually.
Yeah, I bet.
I think so Adam, in Henry's Wild Fjords residency, it was 43 degrees, which is just above freezing, a little bit above, yeah. And raining almost the whole time, and we were outdoors the whole time. And I remember on the first day thinking, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it. Like, my body is not for this. But we started in Isafjordur, and we found on that first day there were public hot baths. And so that was my saving right before we went out into the wilds. Take a soak and get temperature up. And then I just remember doing this thing of thinking, I just had to tell myself I'm warm, even though I was freezing. I'm warm. I am warm. And it was like mind over matter. I'm warm. I'm warm. And I don't know how it was for you, but I wasn't warm. And I wasn't, when you don't see a possibility of warmth in the future, that's where it's like, right, you just have to decide that warmth is different. And I think, Pam, the heading into the Lost Pond was so much that, you know, a different kind of chill of like the deaths. It was chilling, and it was otherworldly, and it was that being inside was not comfortable. So Henry's insistence that we keep moving, right, in that way.
Right. Yes.
And also the container idea of the container, and that the weather is what it is, and you still move, you still go. You don't say, oh, it's not so good, so we're not gonna. You keep moving. So befriending the weather, even if it's not very friendly. And so that, for me, that was the guiding principle.
And did you find the weather also had an effect on your general mood and sense of who you were in space and time, in a way?
Yeah, like the slight rain, dark, misty, cold, you know, is better. Conversations are better when the cloud cover is low.
Yes.
You
know, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go.
I've been I spent the first half of my life in New England and lived actually outside of Boston. So I know bad cold weather. And then I've been in Southern California now for about 30 years, where there's no such thing, except it is gray and chilly today, which is funny. But so I loved actually being in the bad weather and the cold, because it took me back to sort of my early life and all of those memories. So it's interesting how weather and memory connects as well. And my experience was that I loved, as inconvenient as it was, I loved the bad weather and the challenge. Yeah, and the way it changed my thinking and the challenge.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was coming from a very different place.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something, Adam, in the idea of inviting people to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think my walk also is an invitation to get uncomfortable, and in a different way, or to find comfort. I remember walking with somebody who wasn't prepared that I made the music and that I would be singing, and she was completely weirded out the whole time. She was like, I didn't know you made music. And I was like, oh God, that's my bad miscommunication. So now I say to people, be forewarned. So that discomfort. There's a lot of layers of discomfort in grief, and I think in loss processing, the idea is to invite yourself to get comfortable with discomfort. And so that I'm hoping that the book is soothing in a way, but also is embracing. Wen Hao, you have your hand raised. Hi. You're muted. You're muted.
So I'm taking inspiration from the words you shared, and sorry, I just only got in here 12, so I only, heard whatever was said there. But between you and Adam, there are a lot of things shared. So I'm gonna make it really short. But during the COVID quarantine, I visited my mother in Taipei. And the quarantine rule back then was 21 days, no human contact. So in the 14 days, I was in a quarantine hotel that is almost like a jail. Even though, it's luxurious, you can pay up to have a luxurious treatment. But the next 7 days, because it's close to Chinese New Year, you can go home, but you can go home and be quarantined. Like you just cannot have human contact, but nobody prohibit you from leaving your home. So I started to take night walks because I'm not supposed to get on the bus and subway. So I walked the entire Taipei city, and I realized I grew up there. I realized how small it is. And as a child, I never explored because I always want on the transportation, right? So that was the first time actually in my whole life that I fell in love with my home country after leaving it for 37 years. Inch by inch, I covered the city. So the subsequent, sort of sharing also a question for you is that, first of all, I really want to join your walk, both Deb, Henry, and Adam. I'll reach out to you. The second thing is I'm due to go to a conference in Windsor, Canada. And so I sat on this idea for about 5 months and couldn't make a move because I just don't want to go there too easily because I have never explored the Midwest after I came here 37 years ago. So let me ask you a question. Like from Detroit to Windsor is only 2 miles. I don't understand why when I search online, people don't talk about walking across from that bridge. And
I've never done it, but I've heard about, yeah, I don't know. I have nothing to say. Anybody done that? Beth, you're in the Midwest.
Yeah, why wouldn't people walk across that bridge? It's only 2 miles between two cities. You can see it. And I couldn't find an answer, but talking about we subject ourselves to something that is a little uncomfortable because I think that's what's necessary to make discoveries. This cannot just be too easy. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity to share and for your story. I got onto one of the walk with Deb. It was life-changing.
Oh, that's so fun. We laugh. I don't think I laughed as hard.
Ever since I got into a bad habit, I always ask a friend to go for a walk with me instead of walk by myself.
Cynthia? Hi.
Hi. I just, in terms of walks, there's always the Appalachian Trail, I'm told. But I wanted to just make comments about my walk that I did for Lost Pond. And just the fact that the walking it's in and of itself in nature seems to be a healing thing. But I was mesmerized by the geolocated soundscape that there was bird song and there was performance, songs and just sound that made the walk feel magical as you walk through, and it started at certain locations. So that was cool. And the shrine felt particularly very deeply spiritual too. So that I got a lot out of the walk. I think it's an effective use of time in healing.
Thank you. Cynthia is the owner of the Gaslight Gallery, where my pinhole photographs of Lucas's room are currently. Gaslight Gallery.
Last weekend.
Thank you for that. Last weekend. Yeah, I think the time thing is interesting, Adam. Like, you can't take an 8-week experience and have that be simulated in a book, right? That's like that would be a big book. But how time plays into reading, I think, is kind of a thing to John Kramer and I spend a lot of time talking about the tempo of the reading experience, how that can play into the tempo of comfortable walking. And so, I think the walk is usually 90 minutes and the read is much shorter than that, but it sort of aims to mimic that timing. And I thought that was a really good puzzle to solve timing wise. But
I think from the moment the way that I'm editing the book, I mean, there's people who give me different advice. There's the sort of, okay, right, well, just skip the boring bits, jump to the next thing that happens, and I'm like, I get that, and without wanting to bore the reader, but there's also that sense of like, in a humorous way, in a creative way, I want to share the discomfort, the moments of boredom, the moment when it's like, why am I on this walk, and because otherwise it's like, I could have gone to all these amazing mythic places, these locations in the UK. I could have got in my car, driven to them, got out, visited it, gone on to the next one. The walk between sometimes covers difficult terrain and weather conditions, but it's that sense of the connection. You've connected the path between these places. It may be the equivalent to that 2-mile bridge, but you've done it. You see how these things, flow from one into the other naturally through the landscape, and you have to go through those moments of boredom or discomfort. And I think it's sharing with the reader some aspect of that. It's sharing them that, my mind isn't just sort of on the wonders of nature and these amazing stories. It's also, where am I going to get some food? I'm cold. What am I going to do about this? It's those things, and sharing the humor and those kind of earthy, practical elements. Those mix of sensations, the space for the mind to go wandering and philosophizing, and to put some of that in, but just to curate it, but to get at the sense of the spaciousness, a sense of the actual distance between these places. It's not just a flight from here to there. This is how far that is, and to just not every time, not the whole 800 miles of it, but at certain times give those experiences, allow the reader to get a sense, so that as much as possible they are on that walk with you, and it feels like it's something that's happening in real time as they read. That's, I think, the wonderful power of literature, that immersiveness. There's different skills, these different art forms, isn't there? Whether it's listening to an album, going on a walk, reading the book, and it's working out what the different strengths of each one are, and then if somebody chooses to engage with all those different ones, then how they speak to each other, and they get a fuller experience.
Yeah, right. And is it important to go from beginning to end, or is it a pop in, a place pop in, a drop down?
But I guess there's the challenge for me as well, is like, well, can I make each chapter work in its own right? Is each part of the walk, a sort of microcosm, a mini walk in itself? Could you just read this chapter and take this particular walk and not the whole thing? And would that work? Is it a series of, I run these guided walks, so they're a few miles in length. So can I make each chapter of the book like a guided walk, but yet there's a through line? Obviously, you'll get a fuller experience if you take that journey and you realize the starting point of the author and where we get to at the end. But equally, if I'm going to, do a Substack post or something and put up one chapter of the book as an extract, you could see that, how experience that as a piece in its own right.
I love that.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Great. Well, thank you guys for coming today to talk about walking. It's great to see your faces. And thanks for supporting the book and helping with the book. And Ed, what do you have there? I can't see it. It's blurry and you're muted.
So it's the cover I put on your book so that I can do the walk.
Oh, I love that.
I'll do the unblur. I think that's the issue.
Yep.
Technical difficulties. Hang on.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like grade school.
It's great.
Ta-da.
The green is good. Wait a minute.
Yes, I love that.
It was a happy accident.
You know, my
Carol.
daughter sent a card on Mother's Day, and she said, "My love of walking is because of you." And that was
Aw.
wonderful, because
Aw.
I always walk everywhere, and in our town, Winchester, Mass, it's not that far out of the bottom. My whole life, people are like, "You walk everywhere, you walk." It's like, yeah, I like walking. It's much easier to walk to town and then go to the fells. I mean, people walk in the fells anyway,
Yeah.
but it's just interesting to me that it's kind of nice to walk, right? To just pay attention. And then I've done a lot of walking in cities, and my kids have.
The sound went out, cut out there for a second.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I've done a lot of walking in cities with the kids, and so they got used to it. But when you're in the city, of course, it's very different than being in nature. But you hear all these languages. It's just you pick up the world when you walk. And then during the pandemic, I got back into walking in the fells, when Howe and I would go sometimes and swim illegally.
Hmm.
But I think the pandemic got us all out walking again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and it's certainly the fells where you are, that part of the world. John, you live on the fells too. Yeah, that's a beautiful. How many acres is that up there, north of Boston?
I forget. A lot.
A lot.
Yeah, it
Big
is, 'cause
acres.
it's different, because you can enter in different ways and all that. And my walk with you, Deb, was really wonderful. And I like it is uncomfortable to deal with grief and to have words for losing a child, and walking together just quietly I don't know what to say. I don't have the words, but the walking was good, and the listening to the music.
Thank you. Yeah, John Steiner asked on the walk, he said, and I think this is a page in the book, does this help? Does this help? And I love that question, because you just don't know what's going to help, right? You have no idea what's going to help in any times of the journey of loss processing, but it's good to follow your impulse, right? See where your impulse leads. And I think the Book of Walks is just a series of following impulses from healing impulses. And the fact that it made a form is very happy. I'm just glad to have brilliant friends. That's like, what's your advice? Have brilliant friends, and they can help you. So anyway, thank you guys. Thank you, Henry, for all of it. So
Such a joy to hear the conversation, and I really wish I'd had you both as sounding boards when I was writing as well about Iceland. And
oh my
yeah,
God.
it's just lovely to see it through the prism of what you're both discussing as well. So yeah,
your Iceland books are magical. I mean, I have them out on my table. They are just so beautiful. Henry has a series. How many books are there? Three books, and a beautiful map.
Yeah.
No,
I can see some similarities in how you're both approaching it, but yeah, at the same time, would have really loved to have had these conversations before writing as well, or while writing. But yeah, no, it's so lovely to hear the conversation continue as well. Thank you for everyone joining. Hi, Pam.
Hi. I hope there are gonna be other books from both of you. No pressure.
It's a fun process. Okay, everybody. I think this is a good time to sign off. Thank you so much. And
thanks, Deb.
Sorry for the time kerfuffle. Okay. Take
Thanks,
care.
Adam. Thanks, Deb.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.